All right, we are at a little bit after 3 p.m., and we're going to start Beyond Coding Camps. So this is a discussion where these very, very experienced people that run coding camps are going to talk about what's next for those kids, that they have the spark lit and what happens to these kids and what they can do. So this will be moderated by Jacob Martinez. He founded and he's the executive director of Digital Nest. And he leads innovative CS education programs for Latino and Latina students in high school and beyond. And that's down in Monterey County area, Santa Cruz and Monterey County. We also have Tom O'Connell with Code Interactive. Tom, I'm introducing you now. Yeah. He's responsible for national expansion by building curriculum, university, nonprofit, and corporate partnerships. We have Christina Lewis Halpern. She is not only an award-winning journalist, but she's also founder and executive director of All Star Code, which attracts, prepares, and places young men of color in the tech sector. And at the end, we have Neal Sales-Griffin. He's the CEO of CodeNOW, and he helps kids learn how to code. He's a self-taught coder, and he founded the Starter League, which was one of the first coding camps in the world. So these guys and gal, they know what they're talking about.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. We want this to be definitely a discussion, so we're going to keep our piece kind of short and sweet. We're going to introduce our programs a little bit and then talk about what we do in terms of engaging youth after they go through a camp. And then we'll kind of open it up for discussion and other questions out there. So just really briefly, I'm Jacob Martinez. I'm the founder and executive director of Digital Nest, which is we develop workforce development centers in rural communities. So we're in Watsonville. That was our first one, which Watsonville's about an hour and a half south of here on the coast. And then we opened up our second one in Salinas, which is about an hour south of here. Both agricultural communities, and that's kind of the focus area that we build these centers in, and predominantly Latino communities as well. Tom?
Hey, I'm Tom O'Connell. First, I want to point out that Jacob and I have the same taste in socks. So, really, good stuff.
Come on, Neal.
We'll buy y'all fancy socks or striped socks. I run Code Interactive. We are, like many of the folks on stage, helping to inspire the next generation of tech leaders from underserved communities by training teachers and putting programs into schools, but also doing a lot of the wraparound work that we need to get those students excited about the outside of school portions, right? So we do mentorship programs at tech companies, we do internship programs, and we also do still some summer programs with students to really get them to connect with their communities and make sure that they're giving back. So yeah, a whole lot of different things in New York, in Austin, and a couple places around the country.
Hi, I'm really excited to be on this panel with you all, friends old and new. Christina Halpern, founder of All Star Code. We're a Learn to Code organization, but focused on young men of color, primarily high school, Black and Latino youth. The overall goal for us is closing the wealth gap. Our way of doing that is developing a new generation of entrepreneurs who can succeed. Our main programs is a summer program that is free, 6 weeks full-time, selective, run at companies. We then have an alumni services program that is really focused on network that we grow and maintain, that stays with the students forever, so they can stay in the so-called leaky pipeline. Then we, of course, raise awareness for this incredibly underserved group. There are no national organizations really focused on young men of color in ensuring that they can be prepared for the innovation economy. And then finally, the thing we're working on is how to be helpful to our whole community of people interested in an equal America and diversifying computing. So that's what we do. We just expanded to Pittsburgh.
He's got
and
me.
Neal helps
there
us.
We go.
Neal helps us out.
No, so we went way back when we were at the White House, right? And all that fun stuff. So
Platform.
yes, and platform, right. So
R.I.P.
I'm Neal. I run CodeNOW. If I were to channel my inner Al Gore, you could say I invented the boot camp. But we were one of the first coding boot camps, not CodeNOW, but the Starter League, which our original name was Code Academy, as Jeff knows. Yeah, Code Space Academy, not Code Academy. Anyway, there's a lot I'm excited to talk about on this panel. There's a lot. I mean, this is great. But what I do right now in running CodeNOW, I sold my company Starter League last year after running it for nearly 6 years. And after doing that, I had trouble sleeping at night because I realized, like, cool, I sold, this really awesome for-profit coding school, and we made millions of dollars, helped lots of people. Over 1,600 students went through this program and are now working in jobs and have started successful businesses and all this great stuff. But when I thought about the fact that, I personally at the time wouldn't have been able to afford that kind of program, I was like, oh, how do I help people that were in my spot? Like, I'm from the south side of Chicago, super low-income background. No way I could afford the school that I was running. So is there something more I can do? And luckily, I had volunteered for one of the very first CodeNOW workshops back in 2011. Because CodeNOW, this nonprofit, started a month before I started my coding school. And Jeff here, sitting in the front, was one of the original teachers and instructors for that program. And with his help, I was able to really get started and figure this all out. So anyway, all this being said, I have a really cool program that I've done now with CodeNOW where there's levels to it. And throughout high school, we're supporting students through and through, both through weekend workshops, online material, hackathons, and summer programs to make sure that going into college, they have a portfolio of work through GitHub and beyond that they can walk you through to explain, here's the programs and applications I built, here's why, and let me show you how it works. So that's what we want our kids to be able to do, and I'm not worried about any of the other credentials or certificates. I work totally outside of the system to do all that. So that's me.
Cool. Thank you. So as you see, we have great talent and great minds here sitting on stage. So there's a lot of discussion around the importance of coding camps, boot camps, hackathons, after-school programming to teach computer science. So all these things outside of the regular day schedule of school. And we have lots of youth, especially youth of color, going through these experiences and getting really fired up and engaged and excited. But what happens after? I think that's what we're here to talk about. So after the kid finishes up, you hand them their certificate or whatever it may be, and you send them out the door. What do you all do and your organizations do to keep them engaged and keep that fire lit within them? Go ahead, Neal.
Yeah,
Jump
okay.
on in.
So my first thought, though, when you were asking about the certificate thing is, if any of you seen Blazing Saddles, there's a part of that I like to quote where we don't need no stinking badges. Yeah. So that's kind of where I stand because I learned that it was way more important to show, to demonstrate your knowledge by showing what you've done or doing something than it is to just hold up a piece of paper and say, I think this represents something that I did. So I just try to beeline straight to that with everything that I do. So beyond my boot camp or experience for these kids is the substance. It's the work. It's what I built and showing what you built and building more things. So, I mean, that's really the short of it. So having that substance. So if you want a job, if you want to start a company, if you want to get investment, if you want to do something else, figure out what's tangible and that represents that knowledge and just share that.
Yeah, it's very important to be successful in the professional marketplace, to have a portfolio, and our students do graduate our coding boot camp with with a personal portfolio and are on GitHub as well as on LinkedIn. And I think when you look at the statistics of our students, and we've been as we've grown, 55% of our students are at top 100 national universities. They're 85% Black and Latino, about 90% are studying computer science. In our internships data for our students in college, we're still coming in, but they're placing into the top of the pipeline at Facebook, at Goldman Sachs, and engineering internships. They come back after our program and say, 60% say it helped them get into a better school, even more say, 70% say that they got more scholarship money. So there really is a lot of evidence that being very intentional about the skills, but also mindsets and attitudes and exposure that you give to youth early on can really last for them. Just in our case. However, and there was a however, right? I think that these what we're finding now as our students are 1-2 years out, there are lots of problems. There's something called, hacker depression, which is they go to hackathon, it's all great. They go back into school and, they don't like their teachers and everything. And, that's kind of, to me, that's sort of whatever. I mean, they're like good, strong human beings and kids. Like they can just get along like we all do. This is not necessarily some crippling problem. However, as they move and pioneer into places where they're the only black student in their computer science, class potentially at some schools, and looking at competing with students who have a lot more social capital than they do, and doing that after a year, 2 years, we're seeing just some emotional issues, some fatigue, and and a lot of different reactions. So I think that's what we're looking at now. It's like, okay, skills. They're there. I mean, if Facebook wants to hire them as freshmen, then what they're on the pathway to continue learning by doing, but being black or Latino, and really and staying with it and staying whole, that's the in a way, that's the bigger problem.
Yeah, so I guess we're a little different in that we do work a little bit inside the system. Don't hate me. It's okay. We
Outside
do.
system.
Yeah, I know.
No, that's good. You need that.
Yeah. So and this came organically because my organization, Code Interactive, used to run just those summer experiences, just those outside of school experiences, and we realized the kids were going back to school and not learning anymore, right? So that's where we came in and said there need to be computer science courses where our students are going back to. And that's how we really started. And luckily we're in New York City. We all have programs in New York City. But New York City had the CS for All initiative really ramping up. So we trained teachers that our students were going back to teach full year computer science courses. So that, in a way, almost started backwards. Yeah, which was awesome. So it was a reaction to what our kids needed. And I think we're constantly thinking about that pipeline and those pathways for kids, right? So some kids might go to a boot camp, then go take a CS class, and then continue on in their journeys, right? Some kids might do the opposite. So how do you make sure that kids are having these meaningful experiences that, like we were talking about, driving that excitement factor, right? And that excitement factor might come from a hackathon, might come from a boot camp, might come from, we do a lot of tech office tours, and just those sparks. You never know what's gonna work with a kid, right? And you're constantly building that emotional hype about what this career might be for this student in the future. So those triggers, we're trying to capture what those triggers are and build that data pool at the end of the year. Say, what did you attend? Out of all, we serve like 5,000 students based on our like professional development with teachers, right? But what did you attend during the year? And now, how do you feel about computer science, right? So we want to be able to say what's working, and is it the boot camp that's really turning kids on? Is it hackathons? Is it a mentorship, a one-on-one mentorship program? So I think that's going to be really important as we look beyond places like New York City that have, that are just crawling with tech companies and tall buildings for kids to walk into. That's great. And places like Montana where we can say, well, this is what you need in rural areas. This is what you need elsewhere. So I think we're thinking systemic. We're trying to do different problem solving. And I put kids into All-Star Code and CodeNOW. Like, I will push them there.
Yep. Well, if I can add just a brief comment, like, I exist to force the hand of the slower bureaucratic systems. That's why I exist. I'm a hustler. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not gonna hesitate. I've done things. So what happens is you launch something without permission, right? So I looked at all the regulatory stuff and I was like, oh man, that's gonna take a lot of work. So why don't I just launch a school and see who's gonna knock on my door to shut me down? And by the time they came to knock on my door to shut me down, I was like, oops, sorry, it already works. So now I could pay for lawyers and everything to deal with all that. So we did that, and that forces the hand. So what happens is you universities and public school systems. Like I worked with Mayor Rahm Emanuel in Chicago. I worked with Northwestern University and University of Chicago. And they would approach me to say, hey, can you take, like, what you're doing is awesome and amazing, and our students are leaving our school to go to your thing. Can we find a way to work together to bring what you do to our school? Yes. Yes, now I have your attention. But if I'm going to try to force and impress upon these slower systems why this is great, no, I need to show you why it's great, and then you can come to me, and I'll think about helping you. So that's how I roll.
Nice, love it. So with camps, there's often a lot of resources with technology. We bring in the tech, we bring in the mentors, we bring in people for them to learn from. How do you keep those things? If a kid, now we're sending a kid back home and they don't have those mentors in home, they don't have the tools in the home. How do we keep those pieces of those going beyond the camp?
They may not even have internet.
They may not have internet at home, right?
Like over 60% of students in the Bronx, I think, just do not have access to internet at home.
Well, I think one of the most, I can talk more about sort of the services that we offer and what we've seen happen with some of our students, but I think from the purposes of, are most people here running organizations or in research? Who's like is at a nonprofit? Is a niche nonprofit research and stuff? Well, one thing that we've had to do in our organization and look at is related to proximity. I don't know how many of you have been lucky enough to hear Brian Stevenson speak. This is something that he's really been talking about and staying proximate to the problem. And I think many nonprofits, including ours, actually became distant from our students as we were scaling. And we've doubled every year. So this year we'll have 160 students in our summer intensive program. So when we started, we were literally all outside the classroom, which was in a co-working space, right? So we saw them, I know their names and everything, they're like texting us. And but as we really grew, I still talk with the students that I know, but as I'd hired all these people, they didn't all actually know our students really well. No, like, who are their parents? Where are they from? Like, actually from. The things that you need to really know someone, they know where they go to school, they kind of know how they did in class, because, like, there are teacher notes. Like, actually knowing them as people, half my team wasn't really there. And I think that's why so many organizations end up falling off with alumni, because it's really hard to keep up. So we launched it became one of our top two priorities. The other one was systematize, or is systematize, but stay proximate. And so it's become a thing. Like, if you have actually met with an alum, like, you get all these kudos, and it's been gamified, and it's still, we need to work on it more. I don't think they're getting enough depth out of these conversations, but it's happening. And so to say, how do we ensure that I forget exactly how you said it, but I would say, how do we ensure that we are listening to our students about their problems and what they need? And say, one hypothesis I'd say is that after our program, which is high school, broadband at home, not really their biggest problem. College and college guidance is, in what we've heard, is really their biggest problem. Like, of course they'd like internet at home, but it's figuring out where they can get scholarship money, and what also school is just good for them, navigating that. It is a huge, huge problem for our students. So that's my...
Tom or Neal, do you have anything to add to that? Or how do we keep the tools and resources?
Yeah, sure. So we definitely, we found that too. Proximate is tough after kids leave, like, your safe space that you teach them in. But we try to just, again, think of that pipeline and where they are, right? Who's going to reach out to them next? They're going back to their teacher, right? So we have a listserv of tons of kids that, surprisingly, does not get many opens. It's rough, right? So, but they also have their teacher, and we encourage their teachers when we train them to be pushers and to push those kids that even are not interested to get that extra experience, get those extra hours, and sign up for things, right? So we leverage community members and teachers to be those extra voices to make sure kids are taking advantage of opportunities. And then the teachers are kind of creating the pipeline as they go too. So a teacher may be trained for one course, and then we train them for the next course and make sure that kids can get access to AP computer science principles. So, and do a summer program in between, which will raise their interest level and get them to sign up. So there's just a whole variety of ways that kids can be accessed. It's probably not email, more likely Snapchat. I haven't figured out Snapchat myself yet, but I think, and they text a lot, yes. You definitely text with your like very, very engaged kids. But, you know, teachers are great at getting kids to do things. I used to be one. I used to force my kids to go on all sorts of things. They loved me for it. Maybe not at the beginning, but after the experience.
I'm a by any means kind of guy, meaning on the educator side. So like, I have to get these kids. So we provide laptops to any kid who doesn't have one when they're at our program. But our program has to be so good that they are gonna like cut off their arm so that they can get access to a computer afterwards so they can keep learning it. That's the idea, is to be so good that if you heard one of these kids' stories after they go through this program and how excited they are, you'd want to buy them a laptop because you want them to keep going. Like, that's how excited that you have to make the kid to want to make that happen, because they are going to be in situations where they may not have access to that kind of thing outside of your experience. So, yeah, I don't know the ultimate answer, but I do know that I track every single kid that goes through my program to make sure they're continuing to learn, and if there's some sort of struggle or resistance there, we can solve it. There are people I will call up personally to get them to support a kid to have the machine that they need to do all this amazing work. So it's almost like I don't want to say it's a non-issue, but like I'll solve it if they come to my program.
I just want to clarify that we, of course, measure actual things like persistence in pursuing computing. We have a very long logic model right now. Even though about 90% of our students say they intend to major in computer science in college, only 50% have taken a CDS class, whether online or in person at their school. Only half have actually taken one in the time that they've graduated from the program, which in this survey is anywhere from a year and a half to 2 years or 1 year. So clearly there isn't enough access to computer science, and this is in New York City, which has one of the most robust, like CS everywhere, kind of things going on. But again, I really do feel for persistence post coding boot camp, and our organization's goal is to close the wealth gap. We are not at our core, Google's diversity HR department, like that. We, of course, are doing that, but that's not our reason for being. We want our students at the end of their education to have successful professions, vocations that are fulfilling for them, where they have opportunities, whether that's as an entrepreneur, whether they're an independent contractor, and of course, in that wonderful thing of being a professional software developer. So when we look at this, we say, what will really ensure that? And it relates to confidence, and mindset. And attitude. So I don't want to make we do give every student a laptop if they don't have one after a program, and we do track this. Over again, I'd say to really ensure that they do succeed afterwards, you really have to look at the emotional challenges they're facing, because it's a really long slog, right?
I just want to shout out some folks doing great work with the non-teachers as well. Like, counselors and admins are getting trained now by every Code.org regional partner around the country, and Counselors for Computing, which works closely with NC WIT, has an amazing one-day training for counselors, and admins can attend as well. Like, we're trying to reach the folks who get students opportunities and can find them and get the students to sign up. But I think, we're dealing with a system also where 60% of our kids, 60 to 70% of our New York City public school kids enter CUNY, which has a very low persistence rate overall for students. And I think we do need to look at what the full pipeline is, what the K to 16 pipeline is. Because if a kid, we've had a lot of our most successful kids from back in the day have taken a break from college. And what do you do when you get that call from kids? And these are luckily kids when our program was small, and we do have that texting ability, right? That's probably happening to like way more kids than you can even fit into your brain and your connections to think about, right? How do we make sure that they have access points? They have re-entry points into the system. And that could potentially exist in our boot camp system as well. How do we give them the confidence to go back into if it's what they want to do, a collegiate environment to continue their studies in computer science or something else?
So you both mentioned the word confidence. What are you guys doing to help build their confidence and maintain it after they leave? It's a tough one.
So, well, this is the whole thesis behind how All-Star Code is designed, again, with the focus that the end goal is really confidence, and motivation, which we measure. 92% of our students, after completing our coding bootcamp, the summer intensive, say that they want to work hard. They plan to work harder in school, after the program. So even though school, in different ways, like they don't really like it, they haven't chosen it. Their school may not even have CS. They've decided to work harder because their sights have been raised, and they now see these new opportunities for them. But so two things. One. First, just telling them that it's an issue, but we look at different attitudinal traits in who we select, and then we focus on growth mindset and really look to change their attitude towards failure. And particularly with our students, Black and Latino boys, this is a real cultural shift because admitting that you made a mistake or admitting that you failed is really hard for everyone and anyone, especially at this age, teenagers, if you remember. It's difficult. So we focus a lot on that and lowering that value, and we even say, if you fail, that's actually good, and we celebrate it. So that's one. Two, a team mentality and creating that network. You mentioned the teachers and that they actually bond. The peer-based support, peer and near-peer support that our students get from their teachers who they stay in touch with, but also from each other, is something that can really help with persistence. We have a mentorship component to our summer, so the students stay in touch with their mentors. And we have some amazing, really committed mentors who are more in touch with the students than, of course, many of our staff. And those things do help.
Mine's short. It's instilling a sense of purpose and affording them with dynamic pathways. So that's how I deal with confidence. So coming in, giving them a reason to actually care beyond just, this is a skill so that I'll dangle a carrot down this tunnel and you'll get a job and whatever. It's more like, wow, I actually care about this now because it's related to something I can do right now that's helpful and awesome. So that kind of, in part, solves some of the confidence stuff, but beyond is around allowing them to explore different paths. And rather than presenting some sort of binary, you either like it or you don't, it's more like, oh, well, I'm more interested in design or front end or back end or AI or VR, or there's all these different, there's this jaggedness associated with each individual story for why they came in and what they're looking at doing going out. You just need to provide that flexibility with your experience and with the resources you provide them with so that that can happen.
All right, can I just be real for a second? You also just tell them that they're special, and in every way throughout your organization in the culture. And I saw this one organization in our space, and they're advertising on Twitter, and their students aren't really on Twitter, but it gets forwarded. They're teachers and others are on Twitter and might then send it out to people. Okay, but the ad is the ad is do you know a young person who's struggling in their career? Well, here's our organization. We can help them. And it's just who are you attracting? With with this messaging, and you're attracting maybe like a mom who has some child who she's unhappy with, and she's going to try and like drag him. And yes, you can get like some mileage out of that, but you're not really going directly to your source. And it also indicates to me a certain mentality within that organization. Sorry, you guys hear where I am with this, right? And I sent this to my team, and I was like, you need to have this in your PowerPoint, okay? When you talk to your volunteers, help us recruit, I want like a big X through it. I'm like, blur out the name, okay? But big red X.
And I think we owe it to each other, to all of the programs that are at the conference and all that we know, to hold each other accountable and make sure that we're actually serving kids and reminding people that we're serving kids and uplifting them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, do you have a spark inside you? Yeah. Here's where you can come and like have that flame, and that's a Hamilton line, by the way, so you can use that. Fan the spark into a flame. Do you have an idea that you think the world should see?
Exactly. Yeah, and you can relate it to your own life and your own community. Like building in points where kids can do things they care about in your program and in your curriculum, making your curriculum culturally relevant in that, kids are the entry point, right? They're doing things creative and that they care about.
If I may give an example, just to kind of bring this home, because this is all awesome. NIFTY is an organization, the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship. They used to be called the National Foundation for Teaching Entrepreneurship. I admire them, but I want to point out an important distinction here with some advice that I have, which is the way NIFTY works is they have this curriculum where they train teachers at public schools targeting underrepresented areas with this entrepreneurship curriculum to introduce students to business plans and that concept of starting a business and that kind of thing, which is great. And I volunteer with NIFTY for the past 10 years. So in 2007, I started volunteering. And what happens when you go to a classroom somewhere like on the south side of Chicago, and you have a group of MBAs. I wasn't an MBA, but everyone else I was with were MBAs. That was a requirement. And these are all black kids, and these are all white MBAs, and me. And the kids are just like tuning them out, or when they're telling them, you can do this, and they're like, yeah, whatever, like that's not me, that kind of thing. It's tough, because then you have not only teachers who are teaching entrepreneurship, who the kids are looking at and they're like, you're not an entrepreneur, but then you have getting advice from people you can't relate to. So there's this issue here where I think, at least what I'm trying to do is, in addition to reinforcing the daytime classroom thing, is we need to show these kids that we need to expose them to people who do what they're aspiring to do, right? So they either need to be role models that can guest speak, or they need to be the people training them. So the way my model works is I have people who are actually software engineers and developers and designers interacting with the students, teaching them the skills, so that when they ask a question, it's not just this abstract, like, you're teaching me the skills so one day I may get some notion of a job. It's like, no, you do something right now where you get paid 6 figures to do this thing and you really like it. Yeah. This is awesome. I can learn more from you. That makes, it doesn't get any more real than that.
So we're going to open it up for questions. We want to ask, the session's recorded, so we want you to stand up and give us your name and what company you're with or organization you're with, and then we'll pass the mic to you as well. So, right here.
Hi. I'm Devin with the Big Sky Code Academy. We're coding boot camp. We also do youth programs, and we're a Code.org partner from Montana. So we actually deal with a huge rural problem. My question is, in Montana, about 30% of our high school students don't go on to a 2 or 4 year. And so the way we position our coding boot camp to them is that it's the career technical education, vocational approach to get into the workforce. The challenge is that the technology workforce in Montana, and I suspect mostly everywhere, still has a bias against developers who don't have college degrees. And so I'm really curious to get your thoughts on, if you're talking to an 18-year-old doing a 12-week boot camp and then getting into the workforce, how are you talking to them, and then how are you talking to the employers about the value of that person that isn't going to pursue the 2 or 4 year degree but is valuable to them in the workforce?
So I'll just from my experience, so we're a predominantly agricultural community. The employers aren't necessarily looking for people with degrees in our community. They're looking for people who are coming in that are young, because having a hard time recruiting young people into the ag industry. So ours, we do a lot of work with the employers, and what we've done is we've taken their entry-level job descriptions, and we tried to build the talent up to that job description, try to get them into those companies. We launched our organization back in the end of 2014. Last year was our full year of programming, and we got one this past month. We got a young guy into a pretty big ag company doing data stuff, and he has no degree. We've had to make sure that the kids, they're more interested in making sure the kids are, have some tech skills, but more importantly, aren't afraid to get their shoes dirty and put boots on and get out in the fields and collect data out in the fields, like literally the field. So that's one of the things they're mainly looking for.
Cool. So I'll really emphasize right now the mentorship component of a lot of our programs and of Script Ed. Moria's sitting back there. She has employees directly involved, or tech folks directly involved in teaching the kids and working with the kids. There's a lot of programs out there that make that connection, not always because they're better at teaching kids. Teachers are probably better at teaching kids, to be honest. But we need to instruct those employees too, that these are their future generation of recruits, right? Especially in our case, where we're mostly serving underserved kids who may not look like their mentor all the time, because there aren't enough mentors that look like them in tech companies, right? We need to train tech companies to say, I'm going to build my relationship with this student over a mentorship program, and then I'm going to give them an opportunity that I might not have otherwise given someone with this resume, right? And it's purposeful, and it may be an internship to start, and then a more direct career experience.
Yeah, that is it's a strategy for sure. Have you worked with Udacity? Have you looked at micro-credentials, or different kind of credentials or badges? So you're not into credentialing? Well, I think just some of the people who are looking at that, how do you get employers to hire people but who don't have college, and they feel like credentialing is kind of the solution. And so Udacity has worked a lot with AT&T to offer certain things. And essentially, though, if you do have people complete these badges, then AT&T, at least, which is a huge employer, is will be very interested in hiring them. So there's a system there for that you could potentially plug into. Our program itself doesn't try to place or encourage our students to go straight into the workforce unless they really have some problem not to go to college. I mean, I think 70% of our students either have full rides or free tuition at their college. So we don't.
Quick follow-up with you, just to clarify. Is your goal for them to work at the Montana-based tech companies, or is it to any company? In the state. So if it's in the state, then the energy needs to be spent around reverse engineering what the hiring criteria is, and working from that success point and incorporating that into your program in some way. Or like Jeff said in the last session, inspiring these companies to put their money where their mouth is and invest more in the longer ramp of getting them ready to be effective workers as a part of those companies. So there's something there. Yeah.
It's a lot of boot camps dealing with it across the country too, even for folks who have 4-year degrees and then go to a boot camp. There is that bias, and I think we're going to see a lot more apprenticeship programs, or I know a lot of folks who are 30 years old and interning at tech companies after a boot camp, and that's a sort of apprenticeship model, but right now it's just not enough time to develop those skills.
Oh, there we go. I'm Jeff from Surrey. And so if we title the panel Beyond Coding Boot Camps, and we say that 2013 to 2016, the industry exploded, if you will, from 3, 4, 5 programs to 150 plus, then perhaps we're now in the rubble post-explosion. Yep. What do you see happening in the next 2, 3, 4 years? Are we going to see more programs, fewer programs, more acquisitions, programs going out of business, regulation, accountability? What's going to happen?
Well, like wild sort of predictions. I think that college is not going anywhere, and I think the coding bootcamp space long term will actually be eaten up by different colleges borrowing, taking the relevant parts of their model. I think long term, the companies, there's too much infrastructure. Like, the company pipeline is college. Like, they're looking elsewhere because they're frustrated, but there's just too much in college, and so many people here are from universities, and they're going to learn, and they're going to find the best model, whatever has to happen. And I think some coding boot camps will remain, and they'll have figured out either how to be really accredited, which I know GA and some other big ones are going to do. I mean, they might even become a kind of college. I think Make School is already looking at becoming accredited and sort of evolving into that kind of environment. Or there may be some really niche offerings. But long term, I think that the ideas behind coding boot camps are phenomenal and are here to stay. I think that the actual sort of entities themselves, in a very long-term way, are in, they're facing long odds.
I'm going to say something weird here, Jeff, and I'm going to say, I don't care. I don't care. So long as we're solving the problem, whatever way that needs to be, let it be. So if someone isn't teaching something that I think people deserve to know, and they don't have access to it or they can't afford it, someone's going to do something about that. And I don't know what's going to happen. Like, sometimes they'll get gobbled up, whatever, but there's so much jaggedness associated with each story, with each school. And I say this as someone who started a coding boot camp, sold one, was a part of that whole thing, and in the mix and around from the beginning. Whatever. It's just like, look, help as many people as possible with what we have. Like, I've pulled in Kellogg and, at Northwestern and the universities and all these other people who reach out, and you're right, they are pulling in some of these things. They're launching their own boot camps at these schools. They're trying. They kind of suck still, but
they have lots of money.
Yeah, but they have a lot of money. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but the authenticity is important, right? So that's why I think we just need to focus on solving as many problems as we can. And maybe, I hope that Turing is around forever. Yeah, exactly. So I would like to see some phenomenal institutions exist and live forever and keep supporting people and becoming great. But who knows what happens, and there's no way I can predict that. I can only just do what I can to make sure that who I'm helping lasts for as long as possible, so long as it's useful to people.
If a university came to you and said, hey, we'll offer you tenure, and you will run this thing out of here, but and you'll get to design all these different things, but you'll get to run it through our admissions department, and look, we're already reaching all these people, and there's this infrastructure. You still do what you do. Are you saying you'd be and you liked the guy woman who came to you? You'd be no.
There are things
tenured professors don't have bosses. Tenured professors it's a lifetime position.
So there are things that would never happen in a university setting that we were able to figure out through these messed up, kind of goofy, weird, making mistakes and trying things. And who thought you could teach someone who knew nothing Rails in 10 weeks where they're at a position where they could get an apprenticeship or junior dev spot? Didn't know that until we tried, right? No university was going to sign up to teach that kind of class. But we did it, and it worked, and now they want it. So
at the same time, there's things that are possible in the university that will never be able to.
Absolutely, exactly. It goes both ways.
And I want to quickly bring up that universities are, regardless of the subject area, are still not serving low-income students in the way that they should be, and in a mass scale that works for students that either don't have the means to make it through a 4-year or 6-year program, just not working. So I'd like to see boot camps really continue as an equity pusher, right? And we've seen some proliferation of maybe those newer boot camps charging $1,000 a week. And it's while some people might say, oh, that's a reasonable price for New York City summer schools. I'm really? You're just making tech companies less able to diversify and be less equitable.
Maybe. There's a missing middle, I think, because to Christina's point, the low-income side, as someone who fit in that category, we get scholarships at the zoo. We get a lot. Like if you get into college, any college, like they'll put you through if you're in that bracket. Now if you're in the middle bracket, there's a
You're a good test taker.
yeah, it's a gray area.
Yeah.
It's a little mixed up. But like Jeff said, I think on that end, you're incentivized to develop programs where you charge the Tesla model, where you're charging a lot for something up front, and over time you're rolling out services that can more, like democratize the resources.
Hi, Sergio Rosas. I am a program director at the Center for Innovation Technology at the LA Area Chamber of Commerce. We run a program that works with over 50 technology companies and connects local students through our WorkSource system, which represents 86,000 students or individuals, and then our community colleges in the LA area. One of the things that continuously comes up with us is the issue of scale, right? So LA is still a developing tech ecosystem, right? You have a lot of companies there. You have the emerging of very costly boot camps. But at the same time, you have really strong public leaders who are really asking us to understand and figure out a strategy to scale and make this very cost effective, right? So when you have a WorkSource system of, of 15 to 20 different centers that serve low income, disconnected youth, meaning they're formerly foster, homeless, they're not currently enrolled in college, we're trying to figure out, well, if there's a boom in tech and we have labor market information that indicates that, how do we create tech skills training programs for this system? So my question to you is, do you have examples, and I know New York leads the way, but do you have examples of other partners you're working with that are helping you talk to employers, that are helping to translate the competencies that you're instilling in your students, because there is a little bit of a bias, right? Our employers are working with our set of students because we've engaged them over the last 2.5 years in, I would say, low-risk activities, career fairs, company tours, job shadows, mock interviews, right? And now we're gearing up for internships. But I'd love to hear some examples of like what those partnerships look like on the at your side of the country, and what are some strategies that LA can mirror as we try to, LA's huge, and geography is a whole nother host of issues that we have to deal with.
You want to help answer that?
Yeah.
Building on it, or?
So I'm Diane Levitt. I'm at Cornell Tech in New York City on that side of the country. So one of the things that's happening that actually I think almost everyone here on this stage has been involved with, at least tangentially, is that the city established a tech talent pipeline. So it's in the office of the mayor, and they brought together industry and sat them down in a series of convenings to say, what do you need? What are you looking for? And then they actually created a series of boot camps. They worked with other, you're gonna have to help me here in a minute, Tom. They worked with other organizations, not GA, but Flatiron maybe?
They work with Flatiron, Coalition for Queens,
Right,
Perskolas.
is working with CUNY.
CUNY Tech is one of the programs out of it.
Right, and they bring low income and sort of low middle income folks in for either career change or vets coming in, or folks who are unemployed through these boot camps and employing them. So, and Reviture, I feel like, is now taking any CUNY grad that they can admit.
I think so, yeah.
The weird thing about Reviture is you go through this 12 weeks and then you have to take the job they give you for 2 years. There's something.
Something like that?
Anyway.
I have a different response to the scaling question. So I would, like, the reason I said yes to CodeNOW last year and took over CEO is because of the scaling potential. So what I ran in my school in Chicago was similar to what Jeff's doing with Turing, which is like, I wanted it to be like the Harvard of coding schools, not the McDonald's or University of Phoenix. However, with CodeNOW, like the way we've structured it, and the reason I said yes is I can drop in anywhere. So sure, we started in DC and then New York. I live in Chicago. We do a majority of our work in the Bay Area. So I literally can drop in anywhere to LA or wherever and run these workshops, because the way to work with what you described is there's two ways. One is you bring the exposure and opportunity to them, or you bring them to the opportunity. I am erring on the side of bringing them to the opportunity. So what we could do in LA is figure out which companies are interested in actually putting up or shutting up to invest in this pipeline and support these communities. And basically beyond the field trip, there was a missing piece. You said internships, and then you said like field trips and like mock interviews. There's an educational component. There's a training component that needs to be included in that list of things that you mentioned. When it comes to that training, force these companies to not only host them for a field trip to show them their office, but make them sit down on the weekends. Their employees would love this, and teach these kids how to work and how to succeed and get started at these companies. Just make it as real as possible and cut out the middlemen. So I'm happy to help and advise and work with you on that.
We have time for one more question.
Yeah, so I'm Quincy Brown at AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And one of the things I'm just curious to get your thoughts on is kind of what I see happening with boot camps as compared to the college degree. So I'm going back to that point a little bit, in that kind of at a meta level, what I see nationwide is that a lot of low-income black and brown youth are going to boot camps, and they're getting trained in a very, I'm going to say, narrow set of skills that will, give them an entree into these positions in industry. Whereas we have a whole different demographic who are being educated, and they're earning college degrees that give them entree into a whole different space. And so while I think that each individual program unto itself is awesome and is doing great work, like part of my worry is kind of at the meta level, in that we are having this bifurcation to some degree, where we've got poor, black and brown with this one type of experience, and frankly, white, Asian, male with a different type of experience that we know, and the reality that we've been talking about leads to very different experiences when you enter a company, what your career advancement is, your ability to, move from company to company. Like, I just wanted to get your thoughts on kind of what's happening at a meta level, not necessarily for your individual program.
I wanted to write an essay about this, and I was going to call it kind of the after-school or enrichment segregation, because it was like, there are all these enrichment programs for, poor youth, right? But it's like rich kids have all kinds of enrichment programs too, right? And they're just like completely separate, but it's not like, poor kids really need these. It's like everyone is doing these, and why can't they just all be together? But I'm wondering about your data, because there's one organization that's doing a whole, I don't know if you know it, that's doing a whole research study on all the coding boot camps. I'm sure both of yours participated. They survey like everyone on like race, ethnicity, and all that. No? Yes?
Like course report?
Yeah, I think it's course report. Yeah. And the data on blacks and Latinos actually graduating coding boot camps was really low. So, I mean, there are definitely people who are doing this, but I don't know that it's that there are that many. But still, I do think overall there is an issue of, because a certain program is sort of only for, they're only going to take, really poor kids, that there's this, like segregation, and then those students don't have a chance to really broaden their social network. There's a lot of data showing that min-skinned programs work, which is one reason the coding bootcamp scholarship efforts are really interesting, just taking students and putting them into their, to their mainline.
It's a bit of it's a choose your own adventure kind of thing, where I am vehemently against strongly advising someone not to go to college, just at a general level. It always depends on the situation that they're in, right? So Ryan Carson, as much as I love him, and the Treehouse guy, and he's very outspoken about, coding's a blue collar job, you don't need to go to college, that kind of thing. I love the guy, that's great, but I don't necessarily agree with that mentality overall, because college provides a very unique experience for a lot of people, especially from underrepresented groups. But it's not as simple as saying going to a boot camp means you won't go to college, or going to college means you won't go to the boot camp. There's some, again, the theme is jaggedness. There's jaggedness to each situation and scenario that we need to understand.
And the skills that someone learns in a coding boot camp really very much apply to college. As I said, ours only enhances our students' college prospects. And, a Year Up, which does something kind of similar, I mean, at the end of the day, almost all their students end up getting at least a 2-year degree, if not a 4-year. And Europe ends up being sort of a tool that ends up getting them back into like kind of the classic education pipeline. So I agree, it doesn't have to be either or. And I know college students who take a summer to do a coding boot camp and then like go back to college.
Yeah, I would say we're going to see that students who do both are actually getting the best outcomes. And, you know, we'll see less drop-off, hopefully, of underrepresented students in college computer science programs if we encourage them to seek out outside opportunities like boot camps.
We could talk afterwards. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, let's go through the examples.
Yeah.
Then we can just tackle them.
Because nobody should be saying that.
Awesome discussion. Let's thank Jacob, Tom, Christina, Neal. Thanks very much.